When we think about the Canada-US relationship, we usually picture this easy, simple friendship. But the reality? Well, it's a lot more complicated. And lately, for Canada, it's getting pretty dangerous. We're looking at 2026 as a real turning point, where a deep structural crisis is now threatening the country's autonomy, its prosperity, and maybe even its very identity.
This quote from David Carman's analysis, man, it just nails it. It gets right to the heart of Canada's modern challenge. It's describing a situation where a close alliance isn't just about cooperation anymore. The very tools of that alliance are being used for control.
So, to really get our heads around what managed subordination actually means, we're going to start by diagnosing the problem. We'll look at the economic damage and the deeper threats to sovereignty. Then, we'll uncover the really subtle strategies being used before we finally explore Canada's pretty bold plan to fight back. All right, so what exactly is Canada's U.S. problem? Well, at its core, it's this dawning realization that its deep integration with the U.S., economically and for security, which was once its greatest strength, has now become a weapon that can be turned against it. And that creates a state of, permanent vulnerability.
And this all boils down to a key concept: weaponized interdependence. The very things that used to make the relationship so strong, we're talking shared supply chains, defense agreements, trade deals, are now the main levers the U.S. can pull to get what it wants.
Okay, so this whole abstract threat, it gets very real when we start looking at the economic damage from the recent trade conflicts. And this isn't just some temporary dispute, it's a fundamental break in the relationship.
And just look at how fast this all went down. It started with targeted tariffs on steel and aluminum. But within a single year, it exploded into threats that could basically shut down the entire Canadian economy. I mean, we're talking about a country where 76% of all its exports head south. That's huge.
And what's so wild is how strategic these tariffs were. I mean, they weren't random at all. They went right for the jugular. The most deeply integrated sectors like auto and steel, all designed to cause the absolute maximum disruption and give the U.S. the most leverage possible.
And the impact was immediate, and it was severe. A 7.5% drop in export volumes. That's massive. It was enough to push the whole Canadian economy into a contraction. It just goes to show how quickly that economic engine can grind to a halt when the border suddenly gets thicker.
And this isn't just some abstract headline number. This is the kind of geopolitics that hits you right at home. The conflict translated directly into about $2,000 extra a year in costs for the average Canadian family. That's real money, hitting them right in the wallet.
And to make things even worse, you've got what experts are calling the zombie USMCA. The deal isn't officially dead, but it's not really alive either. It's just there. And this permanent state of uncertainty, it absolutely paralyzes long-term business investment, because how can you plan for the future when the rules could change at any moment? But here's the thing. The damage isn't just about money. This lopsided relationship, this trap, it strikes at the very foundations of Canada's sovereignty. Its ability to keep its best and brightest, to maintain its own identity, and to make its own decisions about security.
Part of what makes Canada so vulnerable is this chronic internal weakness. Its business sector is only about 73% as productive as the U.S. counterpart, and that's largely because of years of underinvestment in things like new machinery and tech, and an economy that has a lot of smaller, less efficient companies.
And this productivity gap, it just pours fuel on the fire of the brain drain. A staggering 2/3 of the top software engineering grads from Canada's best schools leave for higher pay and bigger jobs in the U.S. That just hollows out Canada's own ability to innovate.
And it gets even crazier. We're not just talking about talent anymore. National security itself is now on the bargaining table. Defense policy has become a chip in the game, with the U.S. basically saying, hit that 2% NATO spending target, or you can expect more economic pain. It's become the cost of admission to the American market.
So you might be asking, how does the U.S. pull all this off without starting a full-blown crisis? Well, it's done through these really sophisticated strategies that operate in what's known as the gray zone, that murky area between peace and all-out conflict.
This is all about statecraft that's designed to fly right under the radar. Think of it like that whole boiling the frog strategy. Use subtle, deniable actions to slowly, steadily chip away at a nation's independence, all while keeping up the appearance that you're still friends and allies.
So there are basically three main tools in this gray zone playbook. First, you create confusion through policy ambiguity, like that zombie USMCA. Second, you make small but constant demands that salami slice sovereignty away piece by piece.
And third, you blend all kinds of pressure, economic, informational, military, to just overwhelm your opponent's ability to even respond. And you can see here just how systematic this is. Each one of these tactics chips away at something fundamental. They erode Canada's authority to actually govern, its legitimacy in the eyes of its own people, and its real-world capacity to defend its own interests. This, right here, is what creates that managed subordination.
Okay, so faced with this, this is a pretty existential threat. Canada isn't just sitting back and taking it. It's launching a really ambitious national strategy to try and claw back some of that autonomy. So first things first, Canada's looking inward to build up its strength. For way too long, it's actually been harder for provinces to trade with each other than to trade with the US. So the idea is, by tearing down these internal trade walls, you can create a single, stronger domestic economy that's way less dependent on just one partner.
The second part of the plan is to look outward. Prime Minister Mark Carney has put out a call to other middle powers, the countries caught in the middle of the US and China, to band together. The goal is to create a new bloc, a new force that can't be so easily pushed around by the superpowers. But, we've kind of seen this movie before. There was a similar strategy back in the 1970s called the third option, and it failed. Why? Because the US economic gravity was just too powerful to escape. So the big question now is whether this new, more global strategy can finally break that old pattern.
When it comes right down to it, Prime Minister Mark Carney put it pretty bluntly. For countries like Canada, doing nothing is not an option. In this new world of great power competition, if you just sit on the sidelines, you become a pawn in somebody else's game.
So the strategy is in place, but the challenge is just massive. That powerful pull of geography hasn't gone anywhere. So the ultimate question really is, in a world dominated by giants, can Canada actually lead the charge to build a whole new table for itself and other countries like it? Or is it just destined to stay on the menu?